In this lesson, we're going to be talking about the minimum system requirements that Red Hat Enterprise Linux has. As with any other operating system, Red Hat Enterprise Linux actually has a minimum hardware set that it requires in order to run efficiently. You could certainly try to install on something less than the minimum system requirements, but you're going to run into issues where it's going to be really slow, it's not going to be very responsive. So hitting the minimum system requirements is really going to be important for your satisfaction and the performance of the system. Now, as with any other Linux distribution, the minimum system requirements are actually pretty modest. For a CPU type, we're looking for Pentium 4 or higher. Certainly more common processors that you're going to see in any system in the last small number of years. We're looking at Core Duos, or we're looking at Intel i5s or i7s. Certainly much more capable processors than the Pentium 4. Minimum is going to be 2 gigahertz or higher, so we certainly got speeds that are much higher than 2 gigahertz in processors in the last few years. So it shouldn't be very difficult to meet the minimum CPU requirements that we've got for Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Now, memory, we're looking for a gigabyte minimum up to the system limit. The system limit is really going to be the hardware limitation that you may have. Hardware typically has a limit on the amount of RAM you can install based on the number of slots that you've got and the size of the cards that you can actually put into those slots. So your limitation on the hardware on the upper end is really going to be the hardware system that you've got. The hard disk, we're looking for 4 gigabytes minimum space. Certainly throw as much hard disk as you want at it, but a minimum is going to be 4 gigabytes. You're probably going to be happier with quite a bit more than that. I'm going to be running this inside of a virtual machine. If you're running it inside of a virtual machine, you can allocate as much hard disk as you've got. Certainly keep in mind the minimum memory so that you've got at least 1 gigabyte allocated to your virtual machine when you're creating it. And the CPU is going to be whatever the CPU is. So we've got the minimum system requirements for Red Hat Enterprise Linux. As I said, they're reasonably modest, so you should be able to meet these fairly easily, even if you get a junker system that's been sitting around for several years and may not actually be doing much of anything. Even that may meet the minimum system requirements and at least give you something to do your training on as you're working towards this RHCSA certification.